Welcome to the Granite Zero podcast. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
No, it's the privilege is all mine. I sort of came across you first on Veteran State of Mind.
Ah, right, okay, yeah. God, that's back a bit. That was a few years ago, yeah.
Yeah, that popped across, and then obviously the release of your book and things like that. I haven't read it yet, so I'm not going to pretend that I have.
That's good. That's good. That means we can talk about other stuff then.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, how is the book selling going? Is it going all right?
Pretty mental, really. So I never intended to write the book to be published. I when I came out of the RAF and I had my meltdown in 2020, I then went on to do some PTSD counselling, and during that time started writing. The book took me 3 weeks to fire, like literally 3 weeks later it was on paper, well, on a laptop. And then I actually sent it to a mate and said, I think, don't laugh, a civvy mate. And I said, don't laugh, I think I've written a book. And she was like, send it to me, I'll have a read. So I emailed her, and she was like, this is really good, you should send it to a publisher. So I did. And a year and a half later, it's on the shop, it's on the shelves. And
happy days.
Mental. It's like a bestseller on the Pen and Sword website where you can get it from. And then
awesome.
It's been a bestseller since it came out, which is just blowing my mind because I never ever intended anyone to read it or publish it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I went through a similar sort of thing with my book, although mine had very much mixed reviews compared to yours. Where I was struggling in what I was doing with my own mental health issues. I started the podcast, but I thought, what else can I do to sort of air these fucking horrible thoughts and feelings that I was having?
Yeah.
So I put the same down on. I started typing it out. Most of the stuff I already had was sort of memoirs that I kept from Iraq and Afghanistan when I was out there. Just little bits from different patrols that I did and how I was feeling at the time, and how being in the RAF Reg, you're not really on the sort of the front line, as it were, unless you're on MERT and things like that. And unfortunately, I never got to do MERT. But it's a lot of waiting. The way I sort of described my time was very much like the movie Jarhead, where they're waiting for stuff to happen, and it's the idle minds and going out on patrols thinking something's going to happen, but then nothing happens, and you're like, oh fucking hell, what am I supposed to do?
But that in itself is pretty detrimental to your mental health. I mean, we used to hold IRT, well, MERT, in the first few years, for a week at a time as a duty, and then we eventually, after it became pretty kinetic out in Herrick from 2008, about 7 really onwards, they reduced the duty down to 24 hours on, so that you weren't in that mental state. And it's that waiting, because the way that the MERT worked is the phone was in the corner of our tent. We had a little green field phone that would ring twice, and then it was fucking straight out of the aircraft. And just every time that phone went, your adrenaline just spiked. And even if it was an admin call, which I think was one ring, or was the other way around, your adrenaline still went fucking through the roof, and then you spent the next hour and a half trying to get rid of it or whatever, until eventually
I bet.
And even when you're sleeping, I mean, as soon as there's a stir in the tent, or someone even unzips the tent to come in, you're up out of your bed. And although you're sleeping, you're never really asleep. You're always just waiting for that moment. So yeah, even the sitting around waiting it on in a war zone, I think it still does grind you down.
Definitely. So what sort of possessed you to join the Air Force?
Yeah. So I'm in Air Force.
Yeah. What made you sort of want to join it?
So my brother he went up to join the army when he was 17, 17 and a half actually. And I went with him up to a place called Palace Barracks, which is back home in Northern Ireland. And he was doing his BARB test, which is the entrance test again to the army. So he went off to do that. And I sat in the careers office, or it wasn't even a careers office at that point. And they had a magazine on the table, and the magazine had a guy hanging outside of a helicopter on what I thought was a piece of rope at the time. So I said to the dude, what's this job, this guy on the rope is at the helicopter? And he said, well, it's actually a wire, and the job is called helicopter crewman or loadmaster, as it was in the old days. So loadmaster encompassed everything, like a fixed wing, rotary, anyone who was in that branch. And I was like, fuck it, that looks like the coolest job on the planet. And that was me. I really knew nothing about it at the time. I was just like, that is cool, I want to do that. And so made a few more inquiries, did an interview there, and then got accepted to go across to Cromwell and do sort of all my aptitude testing and stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did that go down with the parents? Obviously you went down to support your brother and came back signing up.
Yeah, signing up. Yeah, well, I mean, they were pretty. I always said from like, you know, as a teenager that I wanted a job where it wasn't, you know, when you meet someone on the street, or in fact, I
Yeah,
actually said,
I
to
get what
my
you
mom, if
mean.
I'm ever on a game show, I don't want to be like, oh, I'm an accountant or I'm a lawyer or something that everyone knows what it is. I wanted a job that was so unique, people would go, what the fuck is that? So yeah, it was, I mean, we haven't got a history of military in the family, but yeah, me and my brother both joined up within a year.
Oh wow.
I came out of training. The way that the air crew system works is you come out of basic training after 3 months as a sergeant. So
Yes.
plastic sergeant, we get called
Yeah.
plastic sergeants. But my brother had already been in the army like a year and a quarter, and I came out 3 months later,
Yeah.
sergeant. It didn't go down so well.
I bet it didn't. We had I used to wind my old man up about things like that. My dad was a PJI for the Air Force, and obviously when they pass out, they get straight corporal and things like that. And I'm like, well, Dad, you were already a corporal before you did anything anyway. He went, because he used to bang on. I was one of the youngest sergeants out of the group that he was with. I went, all right, how old are you? He was like, I was 24. And I was like, yeah, but you're already a corporal. That doesn't count. Shut up.
Yeah. Well, I would say I was a sergeant air crew at 19 because I joined your 19th birthday. And
that's mad, isn't it? When you think about it, sergeant at 19.
thank fuck we lived in the little bubble at Cromwell, because
Yeah,
if we
I
didn't
bet.
live by the Air Force, we'd get swallowed up. But and yeah, everyone called us plastic sergeants. But I mean, I was in Iraq at 21. I was the youngest air crew to go to Iraq.
Yeah.
Because I was really lucky that my system went through. I mean, you hear about all these horror stories now about people having to hold going through the training system. I didn't. I was really lucky. I did Cromwell, like basic loadmaster training at Cromwell was another 3 months, I think, and then off to Shawbury. Shawbury's a 6-month course, whizzed through that, and then was basic Odium I arrived at Odium when I was 20, and had my 21st birthday on the OCF, and then straight out to Iraq. No, baptism of fire.
Yeah. I wasn't too dissimilar in terms of age when I went out to Iraq. I went out in 2009. I was 22. I had my 21st birthday on Fieldcraft 1, they called it, out in Stanta.
Nice.
Which was nice because the DS staff managed to get me some fish and chips, which was nice. And then I could have jacked out and stood there and ate it all, but I thought, no, I might as well just share some love with the lads. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you were out in Iraq then whenever Iraq was getting malleted with IDF, that kind of time.
Yeah.
So looking back now, we'd already, as a Chinook force, we turned our eyes towards Afghanistan at that point. And my time in Iraq was really quiet because we were there I went out after the war had finished, so we were just doing routine tasking around like Shiber and Basra Palace, like that. But and then in Afghan, the public focus and even the media was very much focused on Afghan, and all eyes were on Afghan. Whereas in the background, you guys were getting malleted every day.
Yeah, so we would get quite a fair whack of IDF, and I just realised, like, when I was there, we obviously did IRT, and that was on the Merlins, because I think all the Chinooks went out to
Herrick,
out to Herrick, because our squadron, our support weapons went out to Herrick while we were in Iraq. So they were one of the first to start doing MERT out in 2009. And they when they came back, because obviously we came back from Iraq, yes, we had a few IDFs, but other than that, I say it's a bit like a lad's holiday. We were going off the subway, we were fucking mincing about with the locals, jumping off bridges, fucking having a whale of a time, getting a nice medal out of it.
Iraq was very happy time for me, because I was junior crewman. I had no responsibility because it was a junior sprog. And we had Pizza Hut, we had the Camel's Toe Bar, where you could have 2 tins or more on an evening. And Iraq was great fun. I loved it. I always say it was like fun. So
it was nice. Well, I say it was nice, apart from the IDF, but and a couple of RTAs that happened. But other than that, it is what it is. And we got back, and then obviously similar sort of time, the lads from Herrick came back, and we were like, you guys look like you've been through the ringer. Yeah. And they were like, we've been doing MERT basically constantly on rotations, and it's just not nice.
No. And MERT, even at the start of MERT, because MERT was essentially, it was called IRT in Iraq, and then it was IRT at the very beginning of Afghan, and then they renamed it to MERT, but essentially exactly the same thing. But the first couple of years I was out there, because I did 10 deployments all up by the end of it, and that's not that unique for Chinny crews, really. We went every year, but we only did 3-month tours.
Got you. I was going to say,
So,
like 10 tours of 6-month tours. That's oof.
Wasn't quite that bad. Although
Yeah.
we did joke that we should buy property out there because we spent so much fucking time in Afghan.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
actually, I mean, I had the same bed space every time I went, because you come back and you go back out again and be like, nothing had changed. The same shit tent holding MERT and the same bed space and the same broken coffee machine and fly wrapper, the fly wrapper hanging off the roof, like about pretty much every fly in the whole of Helmand stuck to it, but still no one would change it for a new one. But yeah, so but MERT was really quiet the first couple of years, and again, it's always equal to the amount of boots on the ground. And actually, the first couple of years in Herrick, we really only had Sangin, Gareshk, Lashkagar, and then Kajaki at the top of Helmand. But the rest of Helmand, you know, we didn't really have boots on the ground, and it was only when we started to push up the valley a little bit, then we started to got a bit more kinetic. So yeah, I was saying MERT was quiet. MERT was a lot of watching. What was that series? 24 back to back.
Yeah.
And then
24.
Yeah, Game of Thrones came out. I've never watched a single episode of Game of Thrones. I don't know how I managed to dodge that one, because I think the whole.
Do you know what? I haven't either. No.
But yeah, it was a lot of waiting around, which is a good thing, I guess. Especially
a lot of hurry up and waiting. But I suppose for you doing the aircrew stuff, that's sort of, you know, a lot of waiting around also sort of means like a good thing. Like,
yeah, certainly on MERT.
Yeah, because you're not getting spun up to go out and then just like, thank fuck, really.
Yeah, well, we do. So the way the crewing worked out there, we would have a crew on MERT, we would have a crew on HRF, which is like the high readiness reaction kind of aircraft, mostly to take ammo, water, that kind of thing to anyone. And then we had like the routine tasking. So you'd have 2 aircraft always doing just the tasking for the day, and there was always 2 Chinooks, because the idea being is if one went down, the other one could, in theory, go and recover all the guys on board, including the passengers most of the time, because I mean, routinely we'd only declare 24 seats per aircraft, but actually the Chinook can lift up to 40. In fact, the Chinook can lift up to 60 people if it really needed to.
The Chinook is brilliant.
Yeah, so that was why we always went everywhere with 2 Chinooks, and then eventually it became 2 Chinooks and an Apache. And I remember at the very start, we were so adverse to the Apaches coming with us anywhere. We were like, what the fuck do we need them for? You know, we're pretty good at looking after ourselves, and they're only going to slow us down, and they're going to get in the way. And they weren't. That they really proved their worth very quickly, and got to the point where we didn't actually want to go anywhere without them by the end of it.
Yeah, I bet. Because I've always been an admirer of, especially the Chinook pilots, because, you know, especially the British Chinook pilots, should we say, as well. Because you look at some of the videos, especially when you're getting ready to deploy, and they send, like, they'll do like the PowerPoint presentations of like who you're working with, and then they put up the slides and the videos of the Chinooks and how they manage to like land or even load people from some of the mountain ranges and things like that. And you're like, fucking hell.
Yeah,
like, you guys got shot at a lot. It's not like you're a small aircraft either.
No, we did. You're right. So we would do a lot of that training. So a lot of the like ridge landings, we see the half wheels or just the ramp. I mean, you can in theory keep the aircraft what is essentially flying, so it's still airborne in terms of like handling it, and that's how the pilot would sit and hover, but then put the ramp down, so the ramp is just on a ridge. We would practice that a lot. I mean, we went to Morocco. California is probably the only nice place I'm going to drop in this entire podcast, because the rest of the time but we did go to California and Jordan, and did mountain ridge landings, so just that, so we could recover a lot of the guys off the most freaking horrendous sites. But it's pretty impressive, because those pilots, obviously, to hover an aircraft, I mean, I'm clearly not a pilot, but you need to have references to scan. And whenever you're sat in the hover 8,000 feet and you look out your bubble window beneath your feet, your reference is nowhere. Your reference is 8,000 feet beneath you. So using the force to do that is amazing. And it's the same with dust landings. The dust landings, whenever the dust in Afghan engulfs the aircraft, I mean, they instantly, dust out, and they can barely see anything in terms of, are they drifting to the left, the right, are they descending too quickly? So it's pretty high level. So I'll take my hat off to them. I mean, the guys that I worked with and flew me around for 17 years are pretty good. They are, the top.
Definitely 100%. Like, and being the youngest service, the Air Force, we as a collective, we get a lot of shit, but when you actually think about it, there's a reason why we get paid more, because we're smarter. No, I'm joking.
I used to routinely introduce myself to people and say, oh, I'm like Liz or whatever, I'm in the Air Force, but I'm on Chinooks, I'm like the pointy end of the Air Force. I was almost so embarrassed to tell people that I was in the Air Force. And then every BBC News report had the Army Chinooks on it anyway, so nobody actually realised that the Chinooks were operated by the Air Force and not the Army.
I know. Well, I've for the longest time, and whenever anyone asks, "Oh, what did you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I was in the military." "Oh, what did you do?" "Oh, I was infantry." For the longest time, I would never say, "Oh, I was in the Air Force Regiment," because everyone goes, "Oh, right, so you're a pilot." No.
Yeah, I still get it now. I go back home to Northern Ireland the odd time and people still ask if how's the army? Am I enjoying it? I'm like, I was never in the army.
I get that.
And if I'm a pilot, and I'm like, I mean, I've done so many of these interviews as well, where people have or radio interviews, and they've just assumed I'm a pilot because they see helicopter and they assume
they see helicopter. Yeah, they see the big helmet and go, "Oh, you're a pilot."
And that's what's the other nice thing about the book coming out, is that it's kind of shone a bit of a spotlight on the fact that there is more than two, pilots on board that aircraft. And you don't, also for young kids to know that you don't have to have a degree and be a pilot to get in the air and have the most amazing career. I mean, everything the pilot saw when we were flying around the world, I saw too. I just saw with my legs dangling over the ramp what I consider the best seat in the house. So
definitely.
Yeah. And I never wanted to transfer. I used to get asked all the time, "Liz, do you not want to go across and do a pilot?" And I was like, no, why? If you've got a call sign, you can get into trouble. Whereas I used to have no call sign, therefore no worries. And I could sit, watch the sun go down at the end of a long day's tasking. And even going through the London heli lanes, which is one of my favorite trips to do, you just sit with your legs dangling over the ramp, and it doesn't really get much better than that. Just waving at people.
I bet. So in terms of aircraft, are you always on Chinooks, or were you on the Hercs and things like that as well?
No, so the way it works is you go through training, they give you a dream sheet, and you can put in your dream sheet what aircraft you want to go on. And initially it kind of sifts you between fixed wing and rotary. So you get your initial kind of which way you're going to go. And I always wanted rotary. And then whenever you're finishing Shawbury, you get a dream sheet and you get to put down what aircraft you want in what order. And I put Chinook, I think, for all three as a bit of a joke, and then got sent Merlin. Funny enough, I was actually streamed Merlin on my graduation at Shawbury, and I was heartbroken. We do we were doing like a beer festival or like a beer drinking game thing. You have to neck your pint at the bottom of your pint glass that says what aircraft you're on. And myself and another guy, actually, RAF Regiment, an old mate of mine called Dusty Hare. He and I were both sent Merlin, and then within about 20 minutes, the senior instructor pulled us aside and said, "Actually, you're not going Merlin. Merlins are backlogged, and you guys are actually going to go Chinook because they can take you like next week." And I was honestly, I think, a bit of skin in my teeth that day, and thank God that it was.
Yeah.
The best aircraft.
Yeah, I remember going through our pass out, or is just before our pass out. I can't really remember, but it was about the time where they started to give our squadrons to what we were going to have. And we had, unless you were some sort of super fitness freak, you might get 2 squadron and go and become a para. But our 2 was 15 squadron and 63, and obviously 63 being Queen's Colour Squadron. Most of us were like, I don't want that. I do not want to be marching around like a fucking knob. Although they do a brilliant job. Just want to say that.
They do.
So I remember getting the sheet that you pull out, and I'm like, fucking please. Because I was shit. When it came to ironing, fucking block stuff, fucking marching, anything like that, I was dog shit. That's
good then. That probably points to not
going to. Well, you'd like to think so, but a few of them that were also very similar to myself actually got 63, but I pulled mine out and I was like, fucking thank fuck. Got the snake and dagger. I'm off to 15 squadron. Nice. And then we were actually quite lucky on 15. And obviously we were the last British patrol in Iraq. We closed it down and handed it to the Yanks, which the Iraqis gave us a lovely leaving present of 64 rockets in a night.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice of them. And then when we went to Kandahar, we then handed that over to I think it was the 1st Mountain Division. I think it was someone like that. But we handed that over to the Yanks as well. So it was like every time we seem to be the end of things. In fact, even when I'd left, one of my best friends, Nick Anderson, was on when they then closed down Bastion. So it was like 15 squadrons.
I was at the end of Bastion, yeah. So I was there whenever I was in Basra when the first Merlins arrived to take over from us. And they hadn't armed down properly, and they fired out a load of flares all over. Like, hey! And then I seem to remember my pilot pitching up and going, "Nice of you to do the fireworks display for arriving." I was there when the Merlins took over, and then in Herrick, I wasn't on the first cabs into Herrick by any means, but I was there in 05, and then my last step was at 15, and I was on the last cabs to lift out of Bastion back to Kandahar, and then everyone pushed up to Kabul. So that was really weird, kind of leaving Bastion. And Bastion had, I mean, I'd seen it grow from essentially a barbed wire fence in the middle of a dust bowl. And we'd underslung everything to build Bastion. You know, the stuff that was in Bastion didn't arrive there by accident. It was all taken out.
No, of course not. No, yeah.
I mean, every day for the first couple of Herrick tours I did, you know, you'd put the ramp down on a daily tasking day, and you'd have like a cable drum, you'd have, you know, fuel drums, you'd have a step ladder, building block, you just have cement mixers, you'd have all sorts of shit, and you just had to, it was like a bad game of Jenga, make all flat across the Bastion. And then by the time we left, and I got handed back to the locals or the Afghan army, it was just it was really sad, actually, really sad leaving it and thinking what's going to become of it. So
yeah,
I saw a BFBS documentary about it a couple of years ago, and it looked like the Mary Celeste, you know, just walking around. You could still see the things you recognize, like the DFAC and the jib. But it was just really weird and creepy looking. Yeah,
definitely. And you know, it's props to all the engineers and things like that for how quickly they turned it into what it was.
Yeah,
100%, 100%. So going to your actual role as the loadmaster, which is probably the coolest title ever, by the way. Loadmaster is brilliant. So obviously, what is your main sort of job that you're doing? Obviously, like you said, you're dangling off the back sometimes.
Yeah,
and you've got the big gun.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we'll talk about the guns then. So well, the bread and butter really is, we're like the eyes and ears of the pilot. So obviously on a Chinook, in fact most helicopters, if the pilot is sat in the cockpit, he can't see a lot of what's going on behind him. So we are the eyes and ears to basically voice marshal the aircraft around the sky or in the landing site. So main things we do is anything that comes in on board the aircraft, you know, inside or underneath, we're in charge of. So center of gravity for that, where we're going to put it, how we're going to restrain it. Troops that come on board, we're in charge of, you know, briefing them, all that, almost the air hostess stuff, but never quote me on that one. And then anything that can't go inside, then we'll put underneath, and we have to obviously work out which drops we're going to put on where and where the CFG is going to fall in the aircraft. So we kind of work all that out pre-flight. We do a lot of the navigation, a lot of the radio. Certainly in Herrick, we take the TAC radio, which is between 0 and the ground call signs and us. And then so when it comes to them picking up all this stuff, so certainly for the undertongue load, you have to make sure you're in the overhead, because if you're going to pick up like a Wimmick or something and you're not directly in the overhead, as soon as that thing comes off the ground, it's just going to swing, and it's either going to swing and damage the chassis, or it's going to injure someone who's been stood next to it. So you have to make sure that the aircraft is in the overhead. So that's our kind of job, is to really refine that for the pilot and make sure he's in a steady hover, and then descend so he's at the right height as well to pick it up. And it's the same when we come into like landing sites, so different landing sites. Not everything's the size of a football pitch, sadly.
Yeah,
so
of course. Yeah.
Confined areas, a lot of the fobs, we will then voice marshal him in from 40 feet, you know, descending, and get him in when and let him know when he's clear of the PESCO or he's clear of the troops to descend. We'll also brief him on any hazards, that kind of thing, like Portaloos that are about to get airborne, which is happening. And then landing on slopes, like I said earlier, the ridge landings, things like that. It's for us. He has no idea where those wheels are, the aft wheels or the ramp. He is sat looking out the front of the aircraft. So it's our job to be, and that's where you really earn your money, because you've got a foot to play with there. So you're trying to, you know, and keep really calm. So all hell can be breaking loose around the aircraft. You could be getting shot at, you could be sliding off a ridge, but the idea being is that you keep your voice nice and calm, almost like an air trafficker.
Yeah, I get you.
Doesn't know what's going on. And so we do all that, and then obviously the guns. So big guns.
We'll get to the guns, but obviously, like for myself, I was a signaller towards the end of my sort of time. I was the lead signaller on the squadron. I was a flight signaller during Kandahar, and a lot of people don't realize that how calm you have to be when you're on the radio, because obviously it's not the greatest bit of comms equipment in the world. So things get broken up, things get lost in translation and things like that, and if you're flapping and your voice is going all over the shop, you know, it doesn't help anyone. So even if the rounds are coming down, or when I was in the command center and it was about to take off because someone hit a fucking IED and all the fucking barcodes come in thinking they know everything. You're like, will you just shut the fuck up? I'm trying to relay information.
Absolutely. And I think because as they come back to the TAC radio, we would be chatting to the guys on the ground for some of the MERT stuff on the way in.
Yeah.
And MERT shouts don't happen for no reason. Nine times out of 10, either they're in a tick, so it's troops in contact, or they've hit an ID or something.
Yeah.
And then we never used to go and land at the point of injury. So the guys would have to then, be carrying the stretcher out to wherever we go to land. So you'd be chatting to whoever was on the ground, and you could hear they were fucking hanging out their asses, they're running whilst being on the radio. And sometimes, not all the time, but the odd time you could hear literally gunfire in the background of the radio calls when you're going into a landing site. You're like, fucking hell, what are we doing? But all still went. But yeah, you're right, clear, like absolutely calm, nice and clear, all about the brevity. And even if all hell is kicking off in the background.
It's mad. Like the amount of times that, because on my last tour, I dealt with every major incident. I was in the hot seat, as I called it, which, funnily enough, my call sign was Granite Zero.
Nice. All right, that makes sense.
And it's also a play on words, but we'll get to that afterwards. So I was Granite Zero, and like fucking everybody would come in. I remember telling my flight sergeant behind me, who was the watchkeeper, I remember telling him to shut the fuck up, because I was trying to relay information from the air desk who sat next to me, who was talking to either MERT or the lads on the ground. And I'm talking to the other call signs on the ground, and I've got the Americans talking to me, and I've got a dickhead behind me screaming at me. I'm like, will you shut the fuck up?
It's a skill. It is genuinely a skill, because we'd obviously have the radio. The pilots would then have air traffic on, or be speaking to anyone who's in the overhead watch. And the Apaches would obviously be up on frequency as well. But then you've got the comms of the aircraft, so you're talking to your crew.
Exactly.
You've then got the doctor in as well, who's piping in, and haven't been able to switch your brain and being able to hear all that stuff in the background, but know that you're listening to something else, or be talking while you're listening to a radio, is a definite skill. It's something that
100%.
I don't know how you ever put that on a CV, but
I don't know. I literally have. I don't know if I've even put it on my CV. But I remember one story. We had I can't remember what the incident was. I can't remember if it was one of the first rocket attacks we had on Bastion, or if it was something else. But I remember we were dealing with about 7 different entities talking over the radio. We were getting one flight to go over here to do something. We got another flight doing something else. We've got the air desk talking to me about what they've seen from the balloon or aircraft in the area. And I remember that this TAC sergeant coming over the net asking for a radio check. And I was like, are you taking the piss? I was like, why are you giving me a radio check now? You can clearly hear the traffic that's going on. And I remember coming up, and I always remember just going, Charlie 1, this is Granite Zero. Can we please not do any more bone radio checks while the incident is going on? And he came storming in a bit later on in the week, because obviously I had basically told him to shut the fuck up over the net, and he's a sergeant and I'm just a mere SAC. He's come storming in, and he was about to have a go at me, and then to be fair, the flight sergeant behind me was like, no, I'll stop you there. While he's in that seat, he's got the wing commander's authority to do whatever he wants on it. I was like, that thank fuck for that. Thank you. I was like, thank you very much.
That was a good thing about Tricky 73 was the MERT call sign, and as soon as we built up the Tricky 73, everybody shut the fuck up on frequency, which was really good. We used to banter the Lynx boys, because the Lynx it was like, I've got a radio, I'm going to talk on it. So we used to we used to call them Lynx FM every time they build up on frequency. Lynx FM's back up. But the Apaches used to relay to us the ICOM, so the ICOM coming from what they were picking up from the Taliban around some of the sites, and they used to ask us, did we want it fed back into our aircraft? And it was like a double-edged sword, because sometimes, a lot of the time the Taliban would say stuff that was just, trying to Jedi mind trick us into thinking that they were going to attack us, and actually they couldn't see us at all. But then the odd time they would say things like, I can see the mosquitoes. Yeah, I can see the fat cows. Yeah, there's 2 of them. Yeah, the mosquitoes are pushing off to the east now. And it's like, fuck, they actually can see us. And then you'd hear they get the big gun ready for the cow, and you're like, oh fuck, that's us, because they call it the Chinook. You're like, why do you even want to know this? Because 9 times out of 10 you did know you were going to get shot at when you landed on, because it was almost a given in Afghan at one point. You're going to either be rocket or shot at. But being told about it beforehand was like, do we want to know this?
You're like, oh fuck's sake, just let me land on. There's someone hurt down there. It's got to be That's got to be fair. That's got to be a bit of an adrenaline booster if you can actually hear him say we're coming after, as you would call, the fat cow.
Yeah, yeah. I've written in the book at one point as well, like, so the because we were on Card Alpha for the rules of engagement at the start and the end of Herrick. So and it was trying to kind of press that onto the younger guys. You've got to really get to that point where you know that if it's him or me, it's him. If you get to that pinch moment where you know that if you do not pull that trigger, your aircraft is going to take a round or you're going to go down. But in the middle of Herrick, it was 49 Alpha. So we were briefed that anything north of Highway 1 wearing a black turban was considered Taliban, and we were well within the rules of engagement to open up on anyone. And the Yanks did, like, frequently. They were prolific. They used to just hose people down.
Oh, yeah, they loved it.
We thankfully were a bit more restrained as a force, really. But that said, there was also some crewmen out there who were pretty gung-ho. They just wanted to go out and fucking get into Iraq. I always had this sort of stance where, again, if it's, you've got to live the consequences. You pull that trigger and you've got to live the consequences for the rest of your life. And we've got a thing called the separation of altitude. So unlike a lot of the guys on the ground, and yourselves included, you go into a building, or the SF guys, you come into a compound, you're shooting someone in the whites of their eyes. We don't have that. We shoot from height, and you don't necessarily always know what the outcome of you squeezing that trigger is. Certainly with the minigun, you can see the Hilux disappear from existence, which pretty much what's happened. But yeah, it's having a trigger in your command. It's a real privilege, and it has to be taken with the the gravity and the responsibility that comes with that, I think.
Definitely, and then like, not many people, especially within the regiment, not many people actually discharged. I think more so when they were out in Bastion. I think they had a bit more kinetic stuff. Probably Kandahar during the beginnings, I would say. But in terms of like what I've sort of done, I think I fired my 9mm, which was actually quite a funny story. We got a bit of chatter saying that there was a lot of moped born IEDs. So we were doing a snap VCP, and there was a moped coming towards me. I asked it to stop. It didn't stop. I was like, fucking hell. Pulled my pistol out and was like, stop. Still nothing. Asked the top cover to fire the mini flare. Still wasn't going. So cocked, shot into capture ground. It fucking hit the ground. Guy was flapping like something out of Team America.
Yeah.
And then stopped using his feet. Literally, it wasn't much distance between us. I was like, fucking hell. So I've gone up to try and brought the Terp up with me, and I was like, ask him why he didn't fucking stop. Fucking brakes didn't work. I was like, well, I was like, he was one, like the next round was either going in the engine block or hitting him. Not that,
that's just it. You've got
not
to
that I was very good with a pistol, but I would have given it a go.
Anyone? We carried Browning pistols for. I remember going out to do the the RSOI, the thing that started sit and get briefed. It was like only the Chinook Air Crew that had the fucking Browning pistol still, and this is like 2013 or something. We were so far behind with getting the Glock.
I never actually got the Glock. So on my last two tours, we had the SIG. P226, which to quote yourself after watching 24, that's Jack Bauer's weapon of choice was the SIG. So
no, we were still in the Browning. But I was a gunnery instructor, so I remember I was telling someone this recently. I look back on my heyday in the forces, and I was qualified on the Browning pistol, eventually the Glock as well, and then the SA-80, but then the minigun and the M60. So because I was an instructor as well, like we used to go out to America, and there was a 360 range out in America, so we would fly from El Centro and go out and have all three guns opening up at once, which is like a crewman's wet dream. Very impressive.
That's naughty. That is naughty.
It was good fun. So,
I bet. All right, Liz, we've got 3 minutes left on this timer. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause it here for the ad break, and I'll send you another link, and we'll continue, and then see where we go from there.
Sounds good. I'll watch for another link.
Yeah.
Cool. Bye.
Hello. You're at the adverts, so don't turn off. Don't turn off, because I've got some good stuff for you. First up, I'm going to talk about our sponsors. Kent CBD is our first sponsor. Now, CBD oil, as you know, has tremendous benefits, especially within mental health and physical health. Personally, I use it to help with my anxiety and my depression, but not only that, I also use it to help with the aches and pains of life in my joints, especially my ankles and my knees. But yeah, without CBD oil, I would have still been on my antidepressant tablets, which I'm no longer on. So, you know, every cloud. And what we're going to do here at Granite Zero is we're going to give you 10% off everything from oil, muscle rub, jellies, bath salts, the lot. Yeah? Make sure you get in there. www.kentcbd.org. Put in the promo code GRANITE0 and get yourself 10% off. You are welcome. But also, if you're like me and you love a nice cup of coffee. Now, for me, I only drink one coffee, and that's Green Beret coffee. Now, I don't only drink it because it's out of this world fucking coffee, roast to order, grinded to whatever specific grind you want. But not only that, it's veteran owned and veteran run, which, you know, hits me right in the feels. So make sure you check it out, Green Beret coffee. Get yourself a nice cup of coffee. I drink it dark, just like my soul. Incredible stuff, incredible stuff. And what I'm going to give for you, I'm going to give you 10% off. So once you get to the checkout, once you've got all your coffee, your products, your apparel, whatever you need, get to the checkout and put in the promo code GZPodcast10 and get yourself 10% off. Courtesy of the Granite Zero podcast. You are welcome. Now, that's enough of me talking about this stuff. Back to the regular scheduled show. Check it out! And we're back after that short advert break. So you gotta talk me through the big gun. Did you name the big gun? Did you have a little name for it?
I didn't, because you had a different aircraft every day. So yeah, it was different.
Fair enough.
Different beast. But yeah, it's called the minigun, which always struck me as hilarious because there's nothing mini about that gun. 7.62 and 3,000 rounds a minute. In the old days, the minigun used to have two triggers, so basically like little triggers.
Yeah, bit like the 50.
Yeah, and previous, like before 2010 maybe, used to have two rates of fire, so 2,000 rounds a minute and 4,000 rounds a minute. And I think 2,000 was left thumb, 4,000 was right thumb. And we used to have a joke, and it was just a joke for anyone who's going to get offended by this, that it was for women and children and the real baddies. And then eventually they changed it over to both triggers did exactly the same rate of fire, which was 3,000 rounds a minute, and 3,000 rounds a minute of 7.62 with bit tracer was pretty impressive. It looked like a lightsaber at night time. Stuff. So we had that on the port and starboard side of the aircraft up front, and only one crewman, so it was your job to man both weapons. So any kind of inch you could glean on the way into a landing site was obviously pretty useful on a lot of the deliberate ops, mainly because unlike the routine tasking, which was during the day, a lot of the deliberate ops we did were landing at sort of known Taliban locations. So if you knew which compound they were located in, you'd obviously man the weapon with the nearest threat to it. Yeah, and then on the ramp we had an M60, and the reason why we had an M60 on the ramp and not another minigun was because the M60 can be removed with just a little pit pin, and so you could get vehicles and stuff like that inside. Then so take the M60 off, load the vehicle, put the M60 back on, and off you go. For a while in Afghan we were doing a lot of roller conveyor stuff, so we put pallets of ammunition on board the aircraft, and then basically you land and you truck forward and the pallets come flying out the back of the aircraft. You have to take the M60 off for that, but then try and fit it for the rest of the day's tasking. So that's why we had one of those on the ramp. And it's 7.62 again, but it's like all trusty. It's just 200 rounds in 2 minutes, and you got a hot barrel. So I think the sustained 1,000 rounds a minute or something. But it was it always worked. I used to love the M60, but it felt like we were back in Vietnam. And it was a weapon that the Hueys had been in Vietnam on bungees. So it's pretty old school. And I think the only way we could get spares for it was through the Argentinians, which always struck me as quite ironic.
Yes, that is. Yeah. Hey, you got any spares for this? Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but no, it was, I mean, I've had to use them a few times. But like I spoke about earlier, you get to that point where if you don't pull that trigger, your aircraft's going to get taken incoming. So if it's him or me, it's him.
Yeah, definitely. And having that big bertha on the side is definitely gonna it's gonna rain some hell down, some hellfire from above.
Because of the limits on the gun, actually, if you get contacted when you're on the ground, it's pretty useless because it's on the stops and you can't actually
I'm
bring it to
guessing
bear.
you can't move it as
No, and it's
freely.
obviously got stops, so you're never going to shoot the rotor blades off. So because of that, it
Well, that
obviously
makes
can't.
sense.
Yeah, obviously helpful. But it means that if you're on the deck, it's really hard to bring the weapon to bear on anyone. And truth be told, if you're taking incoming in a Chinook on the ground, 9 times out of 10 you don't know about it because it's really hard to hear. The noise of the aircraft is so loud.
It's a loud aircraft, to be fair.
You can sometimes hear a little ting 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 as the rounds coming around you, which is obviously really reassuring when you're stood at the minigun and there's fuck all you can do about it apart from hope that you've got your little ready brick glow around you and that no one's gonna freaking get you. But yeah, you can sometimes see dust kicking up around the aircraft on the landing site, and then you're taking incoming. But to try and identify a firing point, especially when you're trying to load an aircraft and do all that stuff at the same time, it's 9 times out of 10 we'll get into contact either on departing a landing site or on the way in, and then call an overshoot and we'll go around. So
I suppose that's always good to have the likes of the RAF Reg, especially when you're doing MERT taskings, because obviously their job is to then secure the landing site.
They were brilliant, really good, and we always
do you hear that, people? They were brilliant.
They really were. Yeah, I mean, MERT shouts when the bat phone went, it was just to see if people running out to the aircraft, and we'd crew in and we'd be doing all our checks, and because one of the crewmen would stay behind to get the rest of the 9-liner, so as a single crewman you'd now be doing double the amount of checks, so you'd be running around all over the place. The medics would be getting their kit on and their whatnot, and the RAF Reg guys would be getting their headsets on and kind of crewing in, and they were really good. Not only did they do the all-round protection at the landing sites, but sometimes on the way to a landing site for MERT, it wasn't just one casualty. You're going to go and get, came through in the radio that it was maybe multiple casualties, and you would just have to get the nod to the guys, and they'd start picking up the seats for us, the sidewall seats, and they'd start folding them up against the side of the aircraft so we could fit more stretchers in. And I think we all knew on board the aircraft when that started to happen that wherever we were going, it was going to be carnage and it was going to be a messy landing site. But they were great, before we lifted out of any landing site when we were collecting casualties, we as the crewmen had to do a head count, and that's the hardest thing in the world to try and do when you've got medics on the floor all like crouched around stretchers. You've got the RAF Reg guys, the force protection guys that come back on, and you're counting them, and then you've got a couple of walking wounded and a couple of guys who are bringing the walking wounded or the casualties kit on the aircraft with their weapons, and then also going back off the ramp, and it's just mayhem. So to make sure that you've got all the right people on the aircraft before you depart is really quite hard, especially when you set off thinking you're going to pick up 3 casualties, and when you actually get to the landing site you realize there's maybe 7 casualties, so you've got to count them in. But and now it's loud, it's dusty, you may be taking incoming, so yeah. But the RAF Reg guys were great, so yeah, thank you.
We'll take that. That was one of the roles that I really wish I got on and got to do was MERT. Obviously, that's one of the big things that we provide. But unfortunately, I was stuck in the command center. But everybody's got a job role. Everyone's got to do something.
It was the best purpose I ever had. It was the best of times and the worst of times, in that I've seen guys come over the ramp who had already died, and the medics brought them back to life up my feet on the floor of a Chinook, and it's just, that's a testament to the medics that we had at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
At one time, Afghan was the only place in the world where you could survive a non-survivable injury, which as a statistic is mind-blowing to think that those
definitely
purely based on our medics. But equally, I've seen so many people take their last breaths in the back of the aircraft, and it stays you. I think that that sense of purpose, it's really hard to get that again in any city job.
Definitely. And for me, that was, I've said it fucking countless times on air, that was my downfall, was when I left. I never had that sense of purpose, and that was when all the flooding of different emotions, from feeling a bit worthless, feeling like I didn't have an identity anymore, because previously I was Tommo, I was the RAF Reg guy. Where have you been recently? Oh, I've been to Afghan. But now it's like, what do you do now? I'm a security guard. Oh, brilliant.
I absolutely get that. I came out of it in 2019 and I was med boarded out because I damaged my neck just from all the flying I did. And I was exactly the same. 2020 started coming unraveled really quickly, and it was that lack of purpose. It was, we were in lockdown. There was like no reason to get out of bed in the morning. What's the point? No one cares. I've got no reason to kind of keep grafting. And the lack of identity, I used to laugh that we put our flying suits on every day and we'd have our name badge on them. And, was that name written there for me, or was it written for people to see who I was, or was it written for me to know who I was? It was, you've got an identity and purpose when you're in the forces, and then suddenly going from that to nothing really hit me really hard, and I started to come really unraveled very quickly, and then ended up taking a huge overdose in 2020.
Oh, really?
Sole purpose of ending my life, and just wanting it all to kind of just go away and end.
I've had those sort of thoughts and feelings. I never actually went whole hog. I made the mistake of getting different medications online instead of taking the ones that are prescribed to me to try and block out all these fucking horrible shit in my head. And at that point I started to get a bit suicidal, but I was like, no, I can't. Like I went and did a few different courses. The biggest one I did was a course called Inner Armor, which unfortunately never grew into what it should have done. It kept getting blocked by higher ups within the military and the police force. Because it didn't have 100% success rate. They were like, we can't give this to the troops. And I was, me being one of them, a couple of Marines that were on it, another couple of RAF Reg guys. There was a really senior, I believe he was a captain. I'm not gonna quote on that, but he was one of the lead guys for the invasion in Iraq. He was at the forefront of that and things like that. And these guys we were all going through this course, going through all this different positive psychology stuff, and you could see all the different cogs turning and how you can get the different shining lights to sort yourself out. So I managed to get myself out of it through doing different courses and things like that.
See, I missed all that. I was and I think, to be fair, the British forces as a whole missed a lot of that. There was a bunch of people who were on Herrick from like 06 right through to 010 maybe, and Herrick was really kinetic then. I mean, MERT was like seen as a mash at one point, and there was no decompression coming back. And then actually they realized we're really fucking people up here. So decompression came in, the mandatory decompression at Cyprus, which everyone whinged about. Everybody I knew whinged about coming back. Why do I have to spend 2 nights drinking beer and chatting with Hardway? But actually, it probably did help in the long run, really, looking back retrospectively. But it was too late for a few people, and I was one of those, But the whole time I was in the forces, I was fine. It was lockdown that did it for me. It was all my coping mechanisms, which were keeping busy your mates, like we all do that, don't we? Going to the gym, going running. I did a lot of running at the time, and funny enough, the more trauma I saw, the more I ran. But suddenly when lockdown hit and you had no purpose, like we spoke about, but also so much spare time, and your thoughts just started to creep up on you again. And that's where it really, just one morning I just woke up and still referred to it like a day watching your life through a lens. It was like being body snatched by the Grim Reaper, and I spent the entire day planning with precision, absolute precision, how to end my life that night, and then took an overdose of 95 amitriptyline tablets, and woke up 2 days later on life support in Basingstoke Hospital. And so don't remember much about the rest of the evening, but thanfully it turns out.
Who found you?
So I didn't know at the time. I came around 2 days later. I had intubated, had a tube down my throat. And the irony was that as soon as I came around, and there was obviously doctors' faces above my head and couldn't really move, I just didn't want to die. That was an overwhelming emotion, was like, don't let me die, don't let me die. And 48 hours before, that was all I'd wanted to do. And it just proves that in that really bad space, your brain can be really hijacked. But I got out eventually on the Saturday and got reunited with my phone that had been left in my apartment whenever turns out I'd called 911 at 10 to midnight. I took the overdose at midnight and then called 911 at 10 to 1, none of which I remember, and was on the phone to them for 11 minutes. So that must have been somewhere inside me, something didn't want to die. And I wish I sort of knew more about what happened in the evening, but it's from I think I can still remember someone saying, stay on the phone, Elizabeth, don't go to sleep. but I'm not sure if that happened or if that's my brain trying to fill in the gaps. But I spoke to the ambulance crew a few weeks later to thank them, because I've always been in the mindset that suicide is an extremely selfish thing to do, and I was always, can't believe people would do that. And I lost a really good mate to cancer as well a couple of years ago, and I, in my suicide note, as I was writing it, I was like, writing all these things down, completely emotionless, writing a suicide note to my parents, and including the fact that, Anna had lost her life and I'm taking mine, oh well. I had no emotion that day, completely void of it. But I realize now that, people, when they get to that stage in life and when you've mentally checked out, it's not selfish, it's kind of your only option. That's how you feel at the time. And I was on a water slide with my donut ready to go down that slide, and nobody could have stopped me by the time I got to that point. And I think hopefully there's a message in the end of the book for people to say, you've got to speak to people if you ever see those signs in yourself. And also for other people to reach out, because by the time you get to that stage, there's nothing you can do. Nobody can help you really. So it's for our mates and stuff to kind of pick up the little tiny signs beforehand. And I was the master of disguise. I mean, no one knew what.
I think I'm speaking from experience. I think us people from the military background are very good at masking that sort of thing.
Yeah. Like no one had a clue.
Forever and a day, my friends and family, apart from my wife, was the only one that really would pick up on the change in myself, because obviously she's seeing me more frequent than my friends, but my friends would still see me as Tommo. Like, I always joke and say, no Tommo, no party. Like, if we're going out, if I'm not drinking, there's going to be there's no party. But at home, I mentioned it on a previous podcast, like it would be even down to the small things. Like, at the time when I was at my worst, my daughters would have been probably 6 and 3, maybe. And the youngest would just throw a spoon on the floor or something, and I would lose my shit. It would be it'd be like the worst thing that's ever happened. And the missus would be like, "What are you doing? She's 3 years old." I'm like, "Wow, fucking," and then I'd storm out or whatever. And then I went from one extreme where I'm getting angry at everything to the next extreme where I'd be just silent and quiet and
not giving a fuck. Your bag of fucks is empty at this point.
And I'd be like completely checked out. I'd be like scrolling through Instagram or whatever. My missus would be trying to have a conversation with me. I'm like, yeah, okay, and just keep scrolling. But now
I think living with someone at the time, somebody might have picked up on my behavior, because I used to run every day, just cycle lots, and I got to the point where I just wouldn't leave the house. But because I was living on my own during lockdown, no one was there to kind of pick up on all these little signs. My best friend knew that I wasn't in a great place, and funny enough, the day before I took the overdose, she actually texted and said, "How you getting on today? How you feeling?" And I'd only seen her like on the Tuesday, and I texted her back and said, "Yeah, much better, really good. I've got a plan." And I texted her that, and she's got it. I mean, she still looks back now and goes, "I cannot believe I didn't pick up on that language at the time, Liz." That and my plan was, the whole day spent planning.
It's sort of like subconsciously you've sort of given her a clue.
Yeah.
Without it, so, in your head, you're like, I've got the fucking plan. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then there's a little part of Liz in there that's gone, right, if I text her saying I've got a plan, she might pick up on that.
Yeah. And all the details are in the book of the day and whatnot, but there was a lot of time where I reached out to GPs and whatnot, and just got slipped through the net really, because they were maxed out because of COVID. So a very lucky girl. The ambulance crew said if I hadn't lived next to the hospital, I probably wouldn't have made it. You could see the hospital from my apartment, so I was very, very lucky. But I still think I've got a guardian angel looking after me. But the good thing is I can now, use my experiences to kind of pass on to other people.
And that's a big thing. I spoke to a previous guest before about because I was always like, oh, does anyone really give a shit of what I talk about on here in terms of the mental health stuff? Is it? Oh, I think we might have frozen. Are we back? And he's another guy that's he's sort of manic, depressive and things like that. He's been sectioned a number of times, and he's like, well, who else is better to talk about it than someone that's been through it?
Yeah. And what I am really keen to do, not just to kind of sort of share my story and hopefully help people who are going through it, but also kind of, I'm hopefully a bit of a positive, story, in that I then wrote the book, and the book was like 3 weeks in the making, like I said earlier. I wrote loads of poetry as well. I found that poetry and just getting stuff out of my head and onto paper was just so cathartic. But I then did like 2 years worth of Help for Heroes counselling, PTSD resolutions counselling. The first one, PTSD resolutions, came first, and I just did not get on my counsellor at all. I was just like, lovely lady, and don't get me wrong, she did nothing wrong, but she had like a headscarf on and bangles all up her arm, and I was just like, she's a hippie, she's not going to get things about miniguns. And she was lovely, but just not the right fit for me. And then I moved on to another. I came through all that, and then the book's obviously come out 3 weeks ago, but I feel like I don't want to let what happened then define me for the rest of my life.
I get you.
I've had my counselling, and I've actually come through it now, and I don't feel like I do have PTSD anymore. I feel like that's a chapter of my book, as a chapter of my life and my story.
Get it.
But it's not me, it's not my new label. And I think that's hopefully a message for a lot of people, because it's sometimes so easy to define yourself forever as having PTSD or trauma or mental illness. But there is a way forward where you can actually come off the meds. I was on meds for 2 years actually after the overdose, and only came off them in January this year. I was on sertraline, and
same here.
Oh, okay. So it fucks you up in so many other ways as well. I mean,
I agree.
It was
again
my entire life up.
Again, I've stated on here that when I was on my antidepressants, I was numb. I couldn't feel anything. I hated it.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to feel stuff. Me being me, an absolute fucking turbo idiot, I stopped them cold turkey, and that was one of the biggest mistakes I ever did, because then all the emotions then came flooding back through, and I went basically on a fucking relapse, really. Then sorting out, going through the positive psychology, actually talking to people, getting more guests on the podcast. This is my therapy. I sit and talk to like-minded people, and it could be about anything. We didn't have to go down this this route of the mental health stuff, but you know, we could have just been chatting about fucking Chinooks all day, and I would have been happy. You know, that's how I say it. It's like having a chat down the pub.
It's talking to like-minded people, because a lot of my counselling was, you know, this whole mindfulness and breathing and all these things. And don't get me wrong, you know, even as a chick who does, I mean, I used to do yoga and Pilates and stuff, and I should have really embraced that and gone, oh yeah, let's try all this stuff. But for me, I was like, it doesn't work. And I'm sure it does work for some people. I know there's people meditation works for. For me, it's been talking about my story to other people, and mostly veterans, you know, people that were in helmet at the same time, or Iraq, and those shared experiences. And it's almost the stuff that got us through the bad times when we were in the forces, which is that camaraderie. That's the stuff that gets you through the bad times when you're out of the forces as well. It's those same people, you know. We're not different. We're no different because we're not wearing the uniform. We're still the same bunch of people, and we still have all the mindset, and that's really helped me massively. But yeah, coming off, you know, I am off my meds now, and life's really good, and I think that's a really, really strong message to put out there to people.
Definitely.
Don't get me wrong, there was no one day where I went, oh, I'm better now. It really slowly happens, but the clouds come less frequently, and that, you know, they're not as dark.
Definitely. So, and I totally agree. And you sound very similar to myself, where you didn't want to be dependent on little white tablets to get you through the day.
I didn't even want to go on them in the first place. I resisted.
No, I didn't.
I resisted.
I only went on them because my wife said that she was getting angry at me because I wasn't getting anywhere. So she was like, you phone the doctor. And this is one of the reasons why I didn't really enjoy going to the doctor as such. I went there and they gave me a bit of paper and they were like, fill it out. And I was like, all right, but you haven't spoken to me. You're getting me to, like, how are you feeling today? 1 to 5 or whatever it was. How often do you get angry? It's like, I could, if I really wanted to get on antidepressants and be like one of the like crowd, I could fill that out and you wouldn't know any different. It's, I think
the day that I took the day
slightly flawed, I think.
It really is. The day that I did take the overdose, so I actually phoned the GP that morning and said, look, I've woken up today and I'm feeling not myself. I feel like I'm emotionally very detached and I want to end my life, and broke down in tears. I actually phoned and eventually I got through to the receptionist, who said there's no appointments till Thursday. And I just broke down in tears, and she said, right, we'll get the GP to call you back. And the GP called me back that afternoon about 2 o'clock. And he asked a few questions. He said, and I explained about how I was feeling, broke down in tears again. And I lived opposite the GP surgery because I was saying next to the hospital. And at no point did he say, look, come across to the surgery. He didn't ask what medication I was already taking, which had been amitriptyline. I'd started taking that on the Monday for my neck, and I'd reordered some of that, and he never asked any of the questions, and he just prescribed me more meds. And I think that's my moment where I just was like, really, no one gives a fuck. And then at 4 o'clock that afternoon, skipped across to the pharmacy and picked up my lethal dose of amitriptyline that I'd pre-ordered, and my sertraline that the GP had ordered me that afternoon, and combined the two and tried to see myself off that night. But I'd reached out for help, and it was just, it wasn't that I don't think they don't care. They were just under-resourced. I think the NHS
under-resourced,
really
and especially during the COVID time, it undermanned, under a lot of pressure. And like a lot of people have said, a lot of things were getting missed because they were focusing so much on this fucking virus that
but I feel very lucky to be a veteran, because I came out of hospital on the Saturday, and I was had a mental health assessment on the Sunday. So it was 2 lovely ladies sitting in a room, and young girls, and they gave me what was essentially a Polly Pocket handout with some leaflets on it, and they circled Veterans Gateway for me and said, call this number on Monday and make an appointment, and then you'll go through combat stress and they'll get you PTSD resolutions and stuff like that. That was actually really good. But I did think at one point, what's to stop me just chucking this Polly Pocket in the bin outside and going and buying a bottle of bleach or something? That wasn't my mindset at the time. But there was no catch mitts. There was no like, we'll see you again in 2 weeks, or we'll call you again on Wednesday. There was follow-up. And actually for civvies, I think coming out in the mental health system, it's really bad. The waiting times are really bad, and I think us veterans are actually really lucky that we they have those catchments to get us. There is a system out there, and not only do they have numbers you can call, but they've also got text lines you can text.
And I think a massive thing, especially in the veteran community, that I've seen, if as soon as like a veteran goes missing or someone's really struggling, it's like, I think there's one that is literally called all call signs, and then there's a beacon thing as well, and they put the beacon out there. Has anyone seen this person? One that I support and have done for the last few years in terms of fundraising and things like that is Rock to Recovery. That's one that I really, really love, because also the fact that they're not a charity as such, so they don't take any profits and things like that. They are fantastic, and as soon as there's a veteran in need, no matter the call sign, even though they are I think they're attached to the Royal Marine Charity.
They are. But the phone call I made that Monday was the hardest phone call I've ever made in my entire life.
A difficult phone call.
And that's why it's so good. There's a text message now, so anyone who's watching this, there is a camera. It's in the back of the book, but there's text message.
I'll put it in the bio as well.
Because we find it's so much easier to write something down. Just write "I'm struggling" and send that off in a text message. But that phone call, and I got through to a lovely Welsh guy. He was really, really lovely. But trying to say the words come out of your mouth. Hi, I'm Liz. I'm a veteran. I was in the Air Force, and I tried to kill myself on Wednesday. It's just I can say it now. Obviously, a lot of time.
At the time, it's really bad.
Yeah,
I remember phoning up the GP when I was trying to get just an appointment, and they were asking me all these questions. Who are you? Blah blah. And I was like, I'm Sean. I suffer really bad from depression. And then as soon as I said the words depression, I was just burst into tears.
Yeah, I get that.
And it was very similar when I actually went through. I did some therapy, and a bit like you, I was sat across to a lady that, I thought, you're not going to understand a word I'm fucking saying. But she was also quite brilliant in different things. Like there was a few things during my childhood that children didn't see, but I don't talk about that. But in terms of like my disconnect from sort of stuff that happened on tour, in terms of IDFs and doing bomber lanes and things like that, and potentially getting blown up, potentially getting shot at every time you go out and things like that. She was like, you say it as though it's sort of like a joke and you're disconnected from it, like it didn't really happen to you. And I was like,
yeah.
I went, because I didn't get shot at. And she went, yeah, but you had the adrenaline there every time you stepped out. At the time you were 20, 22, 24, and I think 25, I think was my last talk. But at the time you're still young, like, and you're sort of just
you normalize it.
Yeah.
You get so normalized to being in that scenario where you can get shot at that you're right. I mean, we all have I think forces people have a really dark sense of humor, don't we? And you do.
Yeah.
Like,
I think if we didn't, I don't think we would cope if we didn't have that dark sense of humor.
No, and that's what I mean, I only learned this through my counseling because I'm definitely not a psychologist, but you know, even from day one in the forces, even if you never set foot in a battlefield, we are trained to be shouted at in our faces and not respond, you know, not to go to the fight and to stay put. We are trained to hear weapons firing and not not burst into tears or cry or run away from the very, very simple things in basic training that we don't even notice we're being exposed to. Things that are training our fight and flight response, and for us to overcome it, to stay in the fight, and just that overcoming what is essentially, because reasoned thought would mean that you'd run away, you know, lions coming to get you, run away, and we are taught from very, very day one in the forces to overcome that reasoned thought and go to the fight, and that reasoned thought, you know, if you're trained to overcome what your brain says is normal, you know, you suddenly all the fucked up stuff becomes normal.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what happened.
Yeah, my wife still finds it funny that when the IDF alarm would go off, we would just carry on as normal. Like, you'd get like the Americans and some others that would obviously hit the deck and start panicking, but those that have been there before, I can't lie, the first time I heard the IDF alarm, I fucking shit my pants.
Yeah.
I was on the floor with fucking helmet on, body armor on. I was like, fuck. And then, like, it's just normal. It's
Kevlar sleeping bag, pull your sleeping bag
yeah,
on.
yeah. I remember in Iraq, just because obviously our bed spaces were known as coffins, like, with the big metal sheet across it, sandbags. But it was probably the best sleep I've ever had. But my missus was like, but you would go to sleep if the alarm went off. I went, well, yeah, if it hits my tent, I'm dead anyway. So, and she's like, why do you think like that? And I went, oh, what do you want me to do? I went, if I start panicking, then I'm not going to get the rest of my jobs done.
Yeah.
You know, my rifle still needs cleaning.
Yeah,
it's dusty.
But it happens so slowly that mentality creeps into your brain, you know. And it takes, you know, a few years in the force of thinking before you know it, you really are desensitized to any form of danger. And you know, people used to say to me, "Oh, you're so brave." I'm not brave. I would call myself brave because 9 times out of 10, if you're getting shot at, it's like crossing the road and nearly getting hit by a car.
Yeah, exactly.
It's over before you even know it's happened. But it's that desensitization towards danger. You know, some of the MERT stuff we went to, we knew that we were going to get shot at or contacted on the way in, but it's your freaking job, you know. That guy is dying on a ditch, and if you don't go to get him, nobody else is, you know.
Exactly.
And it's like everybody in the forces is pulling their weight to do their little part of the cog. You know, there was no option B, so you know you're gonna go. And I honestly never. I'm not being macho or brave here to say it, but I don't think I ever felt scared, because the only time I ever did feel scared on the back of an aircraft was when we hit a set of wires in Kajaki in 2005, and I actually thought we were going to crash the aircraft. And then we had to limp our way back to Bastion, which was like the longest 45 minutes of my entire life, flying that Chinook back to Bastion when we didn't know what we'd done, what damage wise. But that wasn't enemy fire. That was just, you know, an issue that we'd occurred in hitting these high voltage pylons. And I always say that's the closest I've ever come to death. But that was a very slow unraveling event. Whereas getting shot at and potentially flying into the bullets, it's not that it's not scary. You're just desensitized to it.
Yeah, I think apart from the first ever IDF, I think the only ever time that I really shit my pants was I was confirming on a IED, or suspected IED. It actually wasn't, but there was a couple of wires hanging out of the floor, and I don't know if he had a fucking hero complex or what, but my Barmer commander, Corporal, came over, looked at it and went, "That's not an IED," and pulled the wires out. Oh yeah, my life sort of flashed for a second. I was like, and I was like, oh, thank fuck for that. But I was like, has he got some sort of hero complex, or does he want to go home with a fucking We're not in America, mate. We're not going to get a Purple Heart or
No.
anything.
But his normality bar was probably, a couple of months ahead of yours or something, because
Quite
that's
possibly.
how we end up like that. That's how we, as a bunch of people, end up like that, and we're all slightly different on the scale, but we all get there eventually.
I can't say, like, later on in the tour of Kandahar, I can't say that I haven't beeped on the Valen and gone, that's not an ID, and sort of put my foot on it. Because to it, the shock of one of my buddies behind me going, fucking hell, that could have been. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not. I know it's not.
Yeah, and that's a really dangerous mindset. I think I've got 2 bullets in my bedside drawer that have been dug out of the airframe by the engineers for me. The first one went in. I should turn them into earrings. The first one came in on one of, like, a routine tasking day. So sometimes they're the days that catch you out the most, is when you're not expecting it. And we took some incoming on a landing site, southeast of Lashkar actually, and a round went in above my head on the airframe, ricocheted through the aircraft, and so the engineers found it for me. But the other crewman kept saying, oh, if I'd have been at the front, Liz, I'd be dead by now. And it's like, but you weren't. And oh, Liz, if you'd have been a foot and a half taller, you'd be dead by now. But I'm not. And it's really dangerous to have that, like, negative thinking. And the second time was, we were doing a deliberate op, and we got contacted with AAA, which came up under the aircraft. We actually got filled up all over the aircraft, but one round came up under my feet and got caught in the ballistic protection panel that I was stood on, and kind of ballistic protection like that. So the engineers very kindly dug that out for me and gave me that one as well. So I've been saved twice by my little halo. But you can't, that catastrophic thinking of, like, but what if, and it could have been, you're not. There's a very good reason you're not, because there's a ballistic protection panel there, or because there's loads of reasons why you didn't get killed. So I think get that positive mindset.
Definitely. And servicemen, women, and veterans, we're always going to have that sort of darkness within us, I think. And that if we didn't, then we wouldn't get anything done. Like a good buddy of mine, Stuart Robinson, who is now a Olympic gold medalist, lost both his legs in Afghanistan, and even his sort of nickname on Instagram is Legless Robbo. So we're always going to have that sort of sort of darkness and joking aside.
Which is why we all struggle as Civvy Street, because I came out of the military and thankfully went straight to work for a charity called Airability.
Cool. Yeah.
Who fly disabled veterans. So anyone who with any disabilities, and civvies as well. But I remember being there thinking, how the hell am I going to fit in here? Because I swear like a trooper, I take the piss massively out of people. When you said your friend lost his legs in Afghanistan, I'm like, well, that was careless. How did he lose them? And you've got this really, really dark sense of humor, which doesn't fit in Civvy Street most of the time, and certainly didn't fit in, or I didn't think would fit in the disabled community. But actually, the disabled community are more brutal than anyone I've ever met in the forces when it comes to taking the piss out of each other. I've got a mate who lost a leg and an arm in a motorbike crash, and people keep nicking his leg and moving his leg around the office when he's not got it fitted and stuff, and that's civvies, but they're brilliant. So I was really lucky.
I had a bit of a thing with a close friend of mine who's a civvy. He's part of my football team that we've got, that we represent, Rock to Recovery. And I put a picture up the other day of, there was a Chelsea player who, I don't know why he did this, but obviously he's given his shirt to the fans, and then somebody's asked for his shorts, so he's taken his shorts off and given them to the fans, and then someone's taken the picture of him running back, but it looks like he's only got one leg. My buddy, this has then messaged me separate to the group, and he went, oh mate, I almost said something really stupid then. I went, what? And he went, like, he must be a brilliant football player if he's only got one leg. And I was like, brilliant. I went, that's quite funny. And he was like, yeah, but I didn't want to put that because of the group, and you guys are mainly military and things. I went, do you not think we would find that funny? It's like,
love it.
I went, we'd probably take the piss even more if you said something like that. And he was like, oh really? I went, yeah. I went, we're not fragile. We don't take offense that easily. Unless you're slagging off other veterans and the actual military, then we will defend. But normally it's like even down to banter between the RAF regiment, it's always like, oh, you did the 5 mile of death. It's like, oh, brilliant. That came out in 2007, mate. Get a grip, will you?
Yeah. No, you're right. It's that like-minded thinking, isn't it? And that camaraderie that keeps us all united. But yeah, it's a very dark sense of humor.
Definitely does.
Lucky now, I work with a load of military people still, and I think, you know, I always gravitate towards them. You can spot military people I love, can you?
Yeah, definitely. We sort of stand out, like even when you're in your civvies and you've kind of got a bit more of a beard, you've got stupid hair, but it's mannerisms and
absolutely language,
down to pointing. You got your knife hand out and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
I haven't quite put a spider in my head yet at any point in the shopping center yet, but those days will come.
Definitely. Well, Liz, I'm not going to take up any more of your time because we've been on for a while now and the timer is about to click in. I just really want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me on the show. It genuinely has been one of the best shows I've done. I've loved every second of it.
Pleasure.
And I will let you know as soon as I've done no editing and I've got it out. It won't take me long. It doesn't take me long at all. Zoom pretty much does it all for me, which is brilliant.
Good. Well, thanks for having me. It's been lovely coming on, and I'll send you some of those links. So
yes, send them over to me. And yeah, people that are listening, make sure you go out and get Liz's book and read it and enjoy it.
Chinook Crew Check, it's called. Yeah, it's literally, does exactly what it says in the tin. Chinook Crew Check.
Love it. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you soon.
Yeah. Cheers. See you soon, Sean. Thanks very much. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.